welcome back to the channel. My name is Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs, and in this video we are finally doing that sew along to the breast cancer survivor's jacket using NL6035. Now before we get started, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe button, and also turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into this tutorial. But before we get started, let me let you know that this is a two-part portion of this jacket. In this part, we will cover the front, the side front, the back, and the side back in this tutorial. Part 2 will cover the rest of it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into this tutorial. All right, so we are doing the next tutorial, which this is a redo of a previous tutorial that I have already done. This is NL6035. So I have done a sew along for this. It was not in good quality. It was it was about a year or two ago. So I'm redoing this because someone have asked, actually a couple of people have asked if I could break it down and redo this pattern. So I'm doing it again. This is NL6035. Now for this jacket, I am doing view A. I will not be color blocking my sleeves. I'm sorry, I will not be doing view B. I'm doing view A. I will not be doing the pocket, and it's going to be a color block sleeve, but it's not going to have the sleeve heading like you see on, I'm sorry, the sleeve band like you see on view B. So before we get started, let me go ahead and pull out the instructions and tell you exactly what we're going to be doing today. So grab your instructions. All right, so on the instructions, you will see that you will need basically pattern pieces 1 through 9. So you need your front, pattern piece 1, your front, pattern piece 2, your side front, your back, your side back, your upper collar, under collar, front facing, back facing, and your sleeves. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and look at the cutting layout. I am following along the cutting layout for view A. Now I am cutting a size 16 because the finished bust measurement is a 44. So we'll get into that in just a second, but this is the cutting layout. Let me move it up so you can see this. So for my cutting layout, it shows that pattern pieces number 3, 5, and 7, these pattern pieces need to be cut with the wrong side of the pattern facing up towards you, and then you're gonna cut around, which I will show you when I show you the pattern pieces, okay? The next thing, the cutting, the terminology, glossary. So basically looking at this section for sewing directions. So you do have lengthening and shortening lines on your pattern, which I will show you that. The seam allowance for this pattern will be 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Also, if you look here where it says sewing directions, it'll tell you the entire glossary, when to press, gathering stitches, edge finish, interfacing, stay stitch. So stay stitch is done at a 1/2 inch seam allowance for this pattern, okay? So that's the key. Let's go ahead and look on the inside of the pattern for your interfacing. So now I do want to draw your attention to the interfacing portion simply because when you cut out your main pieces, it wants you to cut pattern piece 3, 5, and 7. If you're using 45-inch fabric, 44 to 45-inch fabric, you will cut those pieces with the pattern pieces facing down. If you are using between 46 and 60-inch fabric, you need to follow the guide that it has for cutting layout for 58 to 60-inch, which means only pattern pieces 3 and 5 will be with the pattern piece facing down on the fabric, okay? So now that I mentioned that, let's look at the interface portion. So like I said, I'm doing view A and B. And for the interfacing, the only pattern piece that needs to be facing down on the interfacing is pattern piece number 7. So pattern piece number 3 and 5, you will face the correct direction with the right side of your pattern piece facing up. Now that I explained that, let's go ahead and look at the steps that we will take. Now, I will do all the steps, and I'm going to read the step while doing it and go very, very slow in this tutorial. Reason being is because I just kind of like in the last video, I just kind of did it off of basically what I do for jackets, okay? So we would do step 1, stay stitch. We're going to reinforce the front. I'm going to skip 3 through 5, which is the pockets, because I do not want pockets on my jacket. I will go down to step 6, which is where we attaching the side back to the back. Number 7 is attaching the front and the back at shoulder seams. Number 8, if you have not applied your interfacing to the upper collar, you will need to do that as well. We will attach the under collar. So number 8 is under collar, not upper collar, is under collar. So number 9, we will attach the under collar to the front neck edge. We will also apply a dart at the neck edge as well. Moving over to number 11, if you have not done so, apply your interfacing to the front and the back facing sections. Number 12, we will attach our upper collar to our jacket. Number 13, we will go ahead and layer it if you have not done that already. And then on number 14, we will be edge finishing the facing piece. The front and the back facing, we will go ahead and edge finish that. Number 15, we will start doing our sleeve, making the E-stitch on the sleeve cap area. Attach your sleeve, make your E-stitch at the sleeve heading area, the sleeve cap. Number 16, if you are doing the sleeve band portion or the sleeve facing, I think it's called the sleeve facing on the pattern piece, which is pattern piece number 10, you will go ahead with right sides together. We would sew the seams and then finish off the ends of that, which I am skipping steps 16 through 18. I'll start back at number 19, where we will turn the sleeve out and attach the sleeve. And then the last step is make your buttonholes and add on your button. So that's everything that we will be doing in this tutorial. This is just a one-part tutorial. Now, the next thing that I want to tell you is how we're going to enlarge our pattern, because I did enlarge my pattern pieces. So I'm going to show you how I do that on my pattern pieces quickly. So the only 2 pattern pieces you will need is pattern piece number 3, which is your back piece, and pattern piece number 1. So I'm just going to show you on pattern piece number 3. So if you look here, I enlarged my waist by 1.5 inch, and I enlarged my my hemline by 1.5 inch. So this is the waist, and this is actually my hip line, which is the very bottom, because that's where the jacket is going to stop. I enlarged that by 1.5 inch. Now I'm just going to use someone else's measurements, just to show you how I do that. So the first thing you need to do is grab the back of your pattern, grab some paper as well, and then you want to get your pattern piece out. Now I have already done that, so I'm just going to tuck mine underneath, just so I could show you what you will do. So I'm just going to tuck this portion underneath. All right, so what we have is just the pattern piece itself, okay? And what you want to do is, you do not have your bust line or your waistline on the pattern piece. So the first thing that you want to do is draw a line across at your waistline. So you're going to make a line at your waistline all the way across, okay? Now, you know that your bust line is usually 7 inches above your waistline. So what you want to do is measure up from your waistline 7 inches and make a line all the way across. So what I would do is at that 7-inch mark, make a couple of dashes and then measure across and make your line, okay? Now, from the waistline, which is right here, you have your hip line. Your hip line is 9 inches from your waistline. So what you want to do is measure down 9 inches which is at the very bottom, which is your hemline also. That is your hip line, okay? Now, if you look at the back of your pattern, you'll notice that the only measurement that it gives you for your jacket is a bust measurement. The bust measurement for me, because I am a 40.5, I'm gonna go up at least 2.5 to 3 inches. 2.5 inches will give me 42.5. 3 inches will give me 43. Well, a size 14 gives me 42. That seems to be a little tight. So I would go up, because to be in between 42 and 42.5 and 43, that 1 inch will give me a little bit more room, which I prefer. So I would go up to a 44-inch finished garment measurement at my bust, okay? Which is a size 16. So the first thing I want to do is notate that I will cut a size 16 for my bust, okay? Now, at the very top, you will notice that you have your waist measurement at the very top where it says Mrs. 7 sizes in 1. You will notice that you have a waist measurement for a size 16 is a 30, and then your hip measurement is a 40. All right, so my waist measurement is a 32. Okay, my hip measurement is a 44. Now these are my measurements. Use your own measurements, okay? Now, for my waist, I want it a little, kind of like a little big. I do not want this jacket extremely fitted. So what I'm going to do is, I know that at the waist, I want a finished garment measurement of a 36 inches, okay? That's at my waist. At my hips, I want a finished garment measurement of a 46. The reason why is because I want room in both areas. So what you want to do is, at your waist, where you have this waistline right here, what you want to do is, you know you have the front and the back. Now pattern piece number 3 is cut on the fold, which gives you 2 pieces, okay? Pattern piece number 1, which I'm going to show you here, you also need to cut 2. So 2 plus 2 is 4. So if you want to add, so say for instance that I'm going to do a finished garment measurement at the bust of 36, 36 minus 30 equals 6. So I'm adding a total of 6 inches at the bust. Because you have 2 front pieces and pattern piece number 3 is cut on the fold, you have 4 sides, right? You have 2 side seams on the front and then 2 side seams on the back, which gives you 4 total. So you have to divide that 6 by 4, which gives you 1.5. So at your waistline, both for the front and the back, you will need to increase that, not the waistline, I'm sorry. Yes, the waistline. So at the waistline, you have to increase it by 1.5 inches. Now, one thing I want to mention is make sure you're doing it to the side seam, okay? So if you look right here, this shows the center front seam. You do not want to add your 1.5 inches to the center front where your buttonhole is. You want to add it to the side seam. I'm sorry, the side seam, not to the center front. So what you do is at that waistline, you will measure out 1.5 inches like I have done here. Now, I'm just gonna say that I'm gonna add 4 inches total instead of 6 inches, just to show you what it looks like. Let me grab some pattern weight. All right, so I'm just gonna put some pattern weights down just to show you what it would look like, okay? Now, the first thing you want to do is trace your side seam, okay? Now, me personally, I would trace all the way around my pattern onto a piece of paper because you will be moving it, okay? So the waistline, right here at the waistline, if I'm doing a 34-inch waist, the finished pattern says 30. 34 minus 30 equals 4. You have to divide by 4, which gives you 1 inch. So at that waistline, you would measure out 1 inch. You would do this for both the front and the back. So that's my 1 inch, and I'm going to make that line right next to my waistline. So this is what you have right here, okay? At the hip line, so let's just say that the hip measurement for a size 16, finished measurement shows a 40. Let's say that you want a 42-inch hip. So you would do 42 minus 40 equals 2. Divide that by 4. So you would do 2 divided by 4, which should give you 1/2. Okay? So at the very bottom, which happens to be the hemline, okay, you would increase the bottom by 1/2 inch. So you go down to your hemline, increase it by 1/2 inch, okay? Now, after you do that, you will make sure to connect your line. So what you would do is, at your bust, I'm gonna give you an example. I'm gonna turn it around so you're able to see this. So at your bust line, you would grade it to your waistline. So let me show you that now. All right, so what you will do, so I'm gonna go ahead and make my waistline. I had to just turn the paper over so you could see. All right, so now what you wanna do is grab your ruler. So you want to grab your hip curve ruler. If you do not have it, go ahead and grab that. And then what you want to do is at your bust line, you want to grade to your waistline. So if you look at your ruler, you'll notice that it looks like that bust line is graded using this portion of your curve. So you want to put your ruler, one portion at that bust line, and you want to move it to where that dot that you made for your waistline to increase would be. Now you don't want a significant amount of a curve, you just want to grade it just a little bit. And then you want to make your line, like this, okay? Now, you also want to take a look at how your line is from your waistline down to your hem, okay? It looks more like a straight line. So you want to grab your straight ruler and go from your waistline down to your hemline and make a line, okay? Now all you have to do is take your pattern piece, and this is your new line that you will cut. You will do the exact same thing for the back. So let me show you the back. All right, so I went ahead and turned the paper over to show you the back. So go ahead and put your pattern weights down, or whatever you use as your pattern weights. I'm just gonna basically fold it in. My pattern piece is folded in just to show you, of course. So you would do the exact same thing that you just did to the front pattern piece. And what that is because you added 1 inch at the waist, you have to do the same thing. So grab your ruler, and at that waistline, you need to go out 1 inch, like that. At the hemline, you have to go out 1/2 inch. Now remind you, use your measurements, not the measurements that I am telling you, okay? I'm just doing this as an example. And then you also want to take note again of which shape this jacket is taking. So it looks like the ruler, your hip curve ruler, needs to be turned this direction, okay? To connect your line. Now this is called an SA curve ruler. You can no longer find this anywhere, so you may only have a hip curve ruler. And your hip curve ruler will look something like this. So you can use this one, which is a hip curve ruler. It's the same thing, no difference. But I just like using my SA curve ruler, you know, because I've been having it for such a long time, okay, for drafting. So what you want to do is, like you did for the front, you would put the top portion at that bust line and then grade to your dot that you just made for that going out an inch or whatever you had to go out, okay? Then you would just measure straight down to the hemline. Connect that waistline to the hemline at that dot, okay? Using your straight ruler. And then you would just close it out at the bottom at the hem. And then just tape your pieces together and make sure you cut that new line that you just created. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the pattern pieces that you will need in order to construct this jacket right before we get into the sewing. So the first pattern piece you will need is pattern piece number 1, which is the front of your jacket. And you need to cut 2 of fabric. The next pattern piece that you will need for this jacket is the back of your jacket. Now, for pattern piece number 3, the back, you will have to cut on the fold of the fabric. This is also where the pattern piece number 3 needs to be on face down. The pattern needs to be face down with the wrong side of your pattern piece facing up, and then you're going to cut all the way around your pattern. So that's pattern piece number 3, which is the back of your pattern, your jacket. You'll also need pattern piece number 2, which is the side front. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Pattern piece number 4, which is your side back, you need to cut 2 of fabric. Pattern piece number 9, which is your sleeve, you need to cut 2 of fabric. And also I want to mention one thing with my sleeve. I did color block my sleeve. So if you want to color block, what I did for my sleeve is at this lengthening and shortening line, I basically folded it right there. I added 5/8 of an inch to the bottom of the top portion. And then I also added 5/8 of an inch when I add it to the top portion. So I'll show you that when I get to the sleeve, okay? All right, so I'm gonna show you this modification that I did to the sleeve. Now, if you want, you could trace out your sleeve. I'm not tracing out the sleeve. I'm just gonna show you what I did. So basically what you're going to do, I created a line right here to place my grain line. So I created a line. Let me move this down so you can see it. I created a line right here just to place my grain line on, okay? So you're gonna put your sleeve line there, and let me grab some pattern weights. All right, so I grabbed my pattern weights and I'm going to place my pattern weights down on my sleeve. Now, what I did was I traced around my sleeve to the lengthening and the shortening line right here. So all I did was folded it under, okay? And this is the same modification you can make yourself as well. So to that lengthening and shortening line, and then I place my pattern piece on that line to show that that is the grain line. And then trace around. Now, I'm not going to trace around just to show you, but just say that I have traced around all the way around my pattern piece. So the next thing you want to do is at the very bottom, the hem line, where your lengthening and shortening line is, you want to add 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, because if you're color blocking like I did, you're going to use 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to attach this top portion to the bottom portion, okay? So I'm just going to measure out 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you're going to make a line all the way across, okay? Now let me put my pattern weights back down, all right? And then you want to close out those lines, make sure that you mark your lines all the way across, and then you can measure down and connect the lines at the side seam. Now, you can label it 5/8 of an inch, seam allowance added. All right, so that's for that portion. Then what you want to do is take the bottom portion from the lengthening line. All I'm going to do is go ahead and just flip it over like this. Fold this portion in, the sides as well as the bottom. Okay, fold it up, and then I'm going to use this portion and increase just the top portion of the sleeve by 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that up and just show you the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance that I added to the top portion to be able to attach my sleeve and still have the same length that I need for my sleeve. So I'm just going to put some pattern weights down. All right, so what I'm going to do is at the top, you're going to measure across 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, make some dots, some lines, that's 5/8 right here. And you're going to basically close it out. Once you measure it all the way across, you're going to close it out. Now mine was not completely 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, but I'm just showing you. And then you, if you want, you can label it 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, FA added. So you know that you added 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to close it out, and this becomes your cutting line. So when you cut it out, you're going to cut right up here, which is your 5/8 of an inch seam allowance that you added. So when you attach your bottom portion of your sleeve to your top portion of the sleeve, you have added 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to where all of this gap right here is gone, and it becomes one sleeve length, and your sleeve becomes the same size as the sleeve on your pattern piece. So you're attaching it at the lengthening and shortening line. So this is the modification that I made to my sleeve to make the color block sleeve. Next pattern piece you will need is pattern piece number 6, which is the under collar. You need to cut 2 of fabric and interface 1. Pattern piece number 8, which is your back facing, you need to cut 1 unfold of fabric and 1 unfold of interfacing. Pattern piece number 5, which is the upper collar, you need to cut 1 on the fold of fabric, 1 on the fold of interfacing, and this pattern piece you need to have with the wrong side of the pattern facing up, and then cut around the entire pattern piece. Now when you do your interfacing, the right side of the pattern needs to be facing up instead of the wrong side. And the last pattern piece is pattern piece number 7, which is your front facing. You need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. Both when you cut the main fabric and the lining, this pattern piece needs to be faced down. The right side of the pattern piece needs to be facing down. The wrong side of the pattern piece needs to be facing up, and then you cut all the way around. And don't forget to interface. Make sure you transfer all your notches and your dots, okay? Now that I showed you all the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this jacket, let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing. All right, so like I said, I am going to walk you through all the steps. First, I'm going to read the step, and then we're going to do it. So we're going to do step number 1 and 2. All right, so step number 1, you need to stay stitch front and back neck edge. So grab pattern piece number 1. I'm going to move the instructions out the way, but do not move your instructions too far. And this is just a way for you to start understanding the instructions of, different patterns, okay? So face stitch is done at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna put one of my fronts out of the way so you can see this. Now, what you're gonna do is you're gonna face stitch the neck edge, all right? So you're gonna start at the top. You're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You're gonna come all the way down till you get to this first dot. There's no need to back stitch at the beginning or at the end, okay? You're gonna do that for both of your front pieces. Also, grab your back pattern piece, which is pattern piece number 3. And what you're gonna do for pattern piece number 3, which is your back, you're going to also face stitch the neck edge. So for pattern piece number 3, you're gonna start in the back, right here at the center, and you're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance and go to one edge, then turn it over, and then starting back at the center back, you're gonna go to the other edge. So go ahead and do both pattern piece number 1, your front, and your back now. All right, so now that I have face stitched the upper edge, I have already done this, but I'm gonna show you what you need to do next, okay? So I'm gonna move one out the way. So now we have done, grab the instructions, we have done number 1. Now number 2 says to reinforce large dot on front, stitch along seam line on either side of dot, stitch through the dot with right sides together, stitch front to side front from armhole edge to small dot, and then you're gonna press your seam towards the front. So this is what that looks like. So grab pattern piece number 2. So the first thing you wanna do is stitch in between these 2 dots right here. So go ahead to the sewing machine and stitch in between those 2 dots. You don't need to back stitch at the beginning or at the end. You just need to stitch at those 2 dots, making sure you stitch through the dots as well. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have went ahead and reinforced this area right here, okay? What you want to do is go ahead and grab pattern piece number 2. Now, one thing that I do is I mark which side is the back and the front, because it's hard to tell on this fabric because it looks the same on both sides. So I make sure I mark the wrong side of my fabric so I do not accidentally attach the wrong side to the right side. So now what you want to do is go ahead and grab pattern piece number 2. So grab pattern piece number 2. And what you want to do is with right sides together, you want to pin the from the notch there all the way down to the other notch. Okay? So the instructions stated to, with right sides together, stitch front to side front from your armhole to that small dot. So there's a small dot all the way down at the bottom. So you want to stitch there. So you're going to match up your front. So now, first of all, you want to find which one is the right side and which one is the wrong side of your pieces. So go ahead and find which one is the right and the wrong side now. All right, so now that you have found which side is your right side and which side is your wrong side, if you have a fabric that's similar to mine's, now go ahead and grab some pins and you're going to pin at that notch. So you have a notch right here in your side front. Go ahead and pin that to your front with right sides together. You're going to pin at the very top. You want to pin at your bottom. Now, one thing I want to mention is it may not line up completely because you may have some ease in the center, the front and the side front, okay? You will have some ease. But make sure you match up this notch right here. That notch matches up to this notch, and you're going to pin there. And then you're going to pin the rest of the front to your side front to your front. So go ahead and pin now. All right, so now that I have my side front pinned to my front, Now, one thing that I want to show you is if your front is not fitting onto the side front, all you want to do is take your scissors and make a little snip right there, just like that. And it will give to where you can now ease that side front into your front. So you will probably want to do that around the curve so it's fitting nicely. Now go to your sewing machine and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and do that for both of your front and side front pieces. So go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now that I have attached my front to my side front, I'm just going to turn it this way. So this is my front, this is my side front. What you want to do is go ahead and move this out the way, okay? Now go ahead and grab your instructions. So we did number 1 and number 2. I'm not doing the pocket, so if you want pockets on the side of your jacket, you need to follow along to the instructions from 3, 4, and 5. So for 3, 4, and 5, you need to follow those instructions to put pockets on the side of your jacket. Now I'm going to continue on with step number 6. So step number 6 says, with right sides together, stitch back to side back, and then you're going to press your seams towards your back. Now one thing I want to mention, I'm going to grab pattern piece number 1 and 2, or I'm going to grab my front pattern piece. When you press your seams, so I finished off my seams. When I press my seams, I actually press using my seam roll. So you want to slide your seam roll underneath and press using your seam roll. Reason being is because if you take it to the iron, I'm going to take it off. If you take it to the iron and just press, your bust area is not flat. Well, we're going to hope that it's not flat, okay? So you don't want to press. If you press it, you can press it into shape to where you have that nice curve over your bust versus press it flat like this. And then you don't have a shaping to your bust, okay? So you don't want to do that. So now grab pattern piece number 3 and 4. So with right sides together, you're going to attach the side back to your back at the side seams, okay? So grab pattern piece number 4. This is pattern piece number 3. Now you want to make sure that you mark which side is the right side and which side is the wrong side. So if you have not done that, do so now. And then with right sides together, you want to pin at that side seam. Now make sure you have the correct pattern piece to pin with right sides together. So you're just going to do the exact same thing as you did for your front. So this curve right here on your side back, you're going to match up exactly like you just did your front pattern piece. Now for the side back, you have double notches right here. So you're going to pin right there at the double notches. So pin there. You want to pin at your top. So right there you want to pin there. You want to pin at the bottom. Right here, so make sure you pin there. And then you have another notch right here. So make sure you pin at that other notch. And then you're going to pin along the side seam of your back. So pin the rest of it together. And if you need to make any clip like you did for the front, do so that back will ease, so the side back will ease onto the back pattern piece, okay? So go ahead and finish pinning now. All right, so now that I have went ahead and pinned my side back to my back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and then you're going to finish off your seams and press your seams towards the back of your jacket. So go ahead and do all of that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and attached my side back to my back, with right sides together. I went ahead and finished off my seam allowance, and then I grabbed my seam rule and pressed my seam towards the back portion of my jacket, okay? So I did all of that. So now that we have done that, let's see what the next portion of your instructions tell you to do. So grab your instructions. We are now on step number 7. It says to stitch front to back at shoulder and side seam. So with right sides together, with your back, the right side of the back facing up, grab your front pattern pieces. Now you want to do with right sides together. So with right sides together, you're going to pin at your shoulders and your side seams, okay? Now make sure you have the right side of your jacket correctly. So the first thing you want to do is pin at your shoulders. So you want to pin your notches. So you have a notch right here. You want to pin. And then you're just going to pin across both shoulders. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the shoulder seams pinned, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're gonna back stitch at the beginning and at the end. So your shoulder seams together, and then you want to finish off your seam allowance and press your seam towards the back. Now, while you're also at the sewing machine, you want to go ahead and do the side seams. So you're gonna pin at your notch, pin at the top and the bottom, and pin all the way down the side seam as well. Exactly what you just did for the shoulder seam. You're going to do the exact same thing. And using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to use back stitch at the beginning and at the end, sew your side seam and then finish it off and also press it towards the back of your jacket. So go ahead and do your shoulders and your side seam now. All right, so now that I attach my front to the back at the side seams and at the shoulder seams, so the shoulder seams, I did not finish it off yet, I will here shortly, but I attached it at the shoulder seams, and I did finish off my side seams because I did try my jacket on. Now, at this point, you want to try your jacket on to see if it's a fit. Now, a couple of things I want to say about the fit. You want to make sure it's fitting in your shoulder area. If it is too small, you're going to have to cut a whole new pattern piece, okay? If it's too small or you didn't enlarge it enough, you're going to have to cut out some more fabric. So what I will suggest at this point is use muslin fabric. If you made it too small and you just wasted some good fabric, use a muslin and do the same thing, basting everything. The only thing you would not need to do is all the face stitching, okay? Just make it out of muslin, test it again, and see if you got a good fit. Just enlarge it maybe a 1/2 inch or whatever, right? Now, after you have tried it on and seen if you got a good fit, you're going to go ahead and move your jacket to the side and grab your under collar, which is pattern piece number 6. All right, so there you have it. That is part 1 of this tutorial. I hope you were able to stay in there with me. Go ahead and look up, click the video so you can see part 2. So until next time, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So until next time, keep sewing.